The open sea was a Bronze Age superhighway. 3,000 years ago, a simple stone anchor or a bronze tool could connect societies across vast oceans, creating a global network long before we thought possible. By the end of this exploration, you will see how these ancient maritime toolkits completely rewrite the story of human connection. How did a civilization with no maps navigate thousands of miles of open water? What can a single shipwreck tell us about a lost world of trade? The answers lie not in grand monuments, but in the weathered tools left behind. What does it truly mean to be connected in a world without wires or roads? Bronze was the engine of an entire age, a material that reshaped the world from the ground up, but its greatest impact may have been out on the water. This was an era of breathtaking ambition, where societies from the sun-drenched Mediterranean to the misty British Isles began to look across the sea not as a barrier, but as a doorway. The mastery of metalworking did more than create stronger swords and beautiful ornaments. It provided the durable axes and adzes needed to carve sturdy planks, transforming simple log boats into ocean-going vessels capable of carrying tons of cargo. This technical leap ignited a chain reaction. Powerful maritime cultures emerged, their fortunes built on the waves. The Minoans on Crete and the Mycenaeans on the Greek mainland did not just live by the sea, they lived because of it. Their palaces were storehouses for goods from distant shores, their economies pulsing with the rhythm of arriving and departing ships. Tin from Cornwall in modern-day Britain could be forged into bronze with copper from Cyprus, then finished as a prized object for a chieftain in Scandinavia. This was a connected world, but that connection was fragile, entirely dependent on the skill of the sailor and the strength of their ship. To understand how this vast, invisible web held together, we must look past the gleaming treasures it carried and examine the humble, hard-working tools that made the journey possible. These toolkits were the ultimate survival guides, written not in words but in wood, stone, and fiber. Think of a Bronze Age ship not as a single object, but as a floating collection of specialized technologies, each one a hard-won answer to a deadly problem. The first and most obvious category was propulsion and steering. This was the muscle of the ship. It included the long, heavy oars that rowers used to push against the water when the winds were silent, and the massive steering oar, a single, carefully carved plank that acted as the ship's rudder, guided by an experienced hand. Without this basic control, a vessel was just a piece of driftwood at the mercy of the currents. The second vital category was anchoring and mooring. This was the ship's parking brake. A simple stone anchor drilled with a hole for a rope could mean the difference between a safe night in a sheltered cove and being dashed against a rocky shore in a storm. This seemingly crude tool provided the priceless gift of stability, allowing a crew to rest, repair, and wait for better conditions. The third and most complex category was rigging and sails. This was the ship's engine. It transformed the invisible force of the wind into forward motion. This system included the woven linen or papyrus sail itself, the towering central mast that held it aloft, and a web of ropes and lines that allowed the crew to angle the sail to catch the breeze. Mastering this technology meant harnessing nature's power, turning a month-long journey of exhausting rowing into a swift voyage of days. Finally, there was the category of navigation and sustenance. These were the tools for the mind and body. They included pottery containers for fresh water and dried food, fishing lines and nets to replenish supplies, and the intangible knowledge of the stars, the flight paths of birds, and the color of the water that told a captain his position on the featureless sea. Every item, from the largest sail to the smallest fishhook, was a critical piece of a larger puzzle. A single failure in any one of these systems could strand a crew 1,000 miles from home. The very bones of this maritime network were the ships themselves, and their strength began with the tools used to build them. Before a vessel could ever feel the sea beneath its hull, a shipwright faced a mountain of timber, armed with a purpose-built kit of bronze and stone. The adze was their sculptor's tool, a heavy blade on a curved handle swung in precise arcs to shape rough logs into smooth, curved planks. The auger followed, a simple yet brilliant tool for drilling the clean, consistent holes needed for fastenings. And then came the chisels for the fine, critical work of joinery. The true genius of these shipbuilders is preserved in the silent testimony of wrecks like the Uluburun, a ship that sank off the coast of what is now Turkey. Its planks were not merely nailed together, they were meticulously joined using a technique called Mortise and Tenon, where a projecting piece of wood on one plank fits snugly into a carved-out slot on its neighbor. This is woodworking of the highest order. Each joint had to be carved with absolute precision, a task impossible without sharp, durable chisels and unwavering skill. The quality of these tools directly translated to the ship's resilience. A hull built with precise joinery could flex with the punishing waves instead of cracking apart. It could bear the immense weight of tons of copper and tin ingots, of ceramic jars filled with precious oils and resins. The strength of the hull was the first and most vital promise of a safe passage, a promise carved not in stone but in wood by the steady hand of an artisan and the reliable edge of a bronze tool. But a strong hull is only a floating shell without the means to move and command it. The second vital category in the mariner's toolkit was all about propulsion and steering, the literal muscle and will of the ship. On a calm day or in a tight cove, the rhythmic work of the oars provided essential manual power. Each long, heavy sweep through the water was a pulse of human effort, pushing the vessel forward one stroke at a time. Yet the true revolution came from learning to harness an invisible force. The invention of the woven sail transformed the sea itself. This was not merely a piece of cloth, it was an engine. By catching the wind, it turned a grueling journey of constant rowing into an epic voyage powered by nature. Guiding this entire enterprise was the steering oar, a massive, carefully balanced plank mounted on the ship's side. This was the precursor to the rudder, and managing it required immense skill and raw strength from a seasoned sailor. A single mistake at the steering oar could send a ship off course by miles or worse into a deadly roll. The relentless pursuit of efficiency drove further innovation. Shipwrights experimented with different sail shapes and complex webs of rigging, creating systems that allowed a vessel to sail not just with the wind, but progressively better against it. This was the final key that unlocked the world. Mastering these tools of movement and control did not eliminate the danger of the sea, but it transformed that vast, formidable obstacle into a pathway that could be understood, challenged, and ultimately crossed. Yet a ship that can move is useless if it does not know where to go. This brings us to the third and perhaps most intellectual category of the maritime toolkit, the art of navigation and piloting. With no maps as we know them and no magnetic compass, how did these ancient mariners keep from getting hopelessly lost on the open ocean? They carried a different kind of technology, one built from observation, memory, and simple, brilliant tools. By day, they tracked the sun's arc across the sky. By night, they followed the fixed patterns of star constellations, their celestial road maps painted in the dark. They watched the world around them with a naturalist's eye. The flight path of a bird could point the way to the nearest, unseen land. The feel of a particular ocean current or the shape of a swell against the hull told a story of their position. They even used a simple tool called a sounding lead, a weight on a marked line, to measure the water's depth and sample the seabed. A handful of mud or sand from the bottom could confirm they were on the correct, well-known route. All of this hard-won knowledge of seasonal winds and star positions became a living library. It was not written on clay tablets but in the minds of sailors, passed verbally from an experienced captain to his apprentice. This collective intelligence was the GPS of the Bronze Age, a system that turned the terrifying emptiness of the sea into a navigable, almost familiar space. It guided a ship not just across the water, but toward a specific beach, a trading partner, a home. This deep, accumulated understanding of the world allowed for something astonishing: the confident journey from one known point to another, stitching the coasts of entire continents into a single, coherent network. But a well-navigated ship still carried hungry souls. The fourth and most fundamental category in the mariner's toolkit addressed a simple, relentless need: the need to eat. Long voyages stretched for weeks under the open sky, and the stored provisions of dried grains, olives, and water in ceramic jars could only last so long. This is where fishing and subsistence gear became not just useful but vital. At coastal sites from the Mediterranean to the North Sea, archaeologists uncover the quiet evidence of this struggle: beautifully crafted bonefish hooks, smooth stone weights that held down fishing nets, and sharp, barbed harpoons meant for larger prey. Think of these not as simple tools but as a portable food supply. A crew could cast a net over the side as they sailed, hauling in a fresh, protein-rich meal that broke the monotony of hardtack and preserved rations. This ability to harvest directly from the ocean had a profound effect. It extended their range dramatically, turning a journey limited by the capacity of their storage jars into a far more flexible expedition. A ship that could feed itself was a ship less desperate for the next landfall. It could wait for favorable winds, take a slightly longer but safer route, or spend extra time at a promising anchorage. This self-sufficiency was a quiet revolution in well-being at sea. The morale of a crew with full bellies was stronger, their bodies more resilient against the hardships of the journey. This simple act of catching a fish, repeated day after day, was a quiet enabler of those vast trade networks. It provided the daily sustenance that allowed ambitious ideas to become real connections across the water. The silent story of these voyages is not found in any library. It is written in waterlogged wood and salt-crusted stone, a tale told by things lost and left behind. Shipwrecks are the ultimate time capsules of this maritime world. When a vessel like the Uluburun sank, it froze a single moment in time, locking tools, cargo, and personal belongings in a tragic but perfectly preserved snapshot of a working ship. Here, an anchor stone rests exactly where it was stowed. There, a carpenter's adze lies beside a half-finished piece of timber. This context is everything. It shows us not just what the tools were, but how they were used, carried, and valued by the crew. On land, the evidence is more scattered but just as telling. The remains of ancient harbors and coastal workshops are littered with the debris of this seafaring life. We find the chips of stone from where an anchor was roughly shaped, the cast-off fragments of bronze from tool making, and the hearths where pitch was boiled to waterproof hulls. Sometimes the most vivid clues are not the tools themselves, but their images. Intricate seals and vibrant frescoes from places like Akrotiri on Thera show detailed pictures of ships under full sail, their rigging and steering oars depicted with an artisan's careful eye. These are not just art, they are technical manuals in visual form. Perhaps the most intimate connection to these ancient sailors comes from studying the tools themselves. not as objects but as extensions of human hands. Modern scientists use high-powered microscopes to examine the subtle wear patterns on a bronze chisel's edge. The minute scratches and polishes tell a clear story. Was this tool used for shaping hard oak or softer pine? Was it swung in a wide arc or used for delicate, precise cuts? A stone weight might show grooves from years of friction with a rope, telling us it was part of a functioning net, not just a stored item. This forensic analysis transforms a silent artifact into a talking piece, revealing the specific tasks and relentless labor that defined life at sea. Each discovery, from a massive shipwreck to a tiny fishhook, is a single piece of a vast archaeological puzzle. By patiently fitting these pieces together, we can slowly replace our guesses with evidence and begin to hear the faint, echoing story of the sea. The Uluburun shipwreck rests as a silent witness at the bottom of the sea. Discovered off the coast of Turkey, this vessel from the late 14th century before the Common Era is more than a collection of artifacts. It is a perfectly preserved moment, a single frame from a bustling age of maritime trade. Its cargo is legendary, gleaming copper and tin ingots stacked like treasure. But to understand the ship as a living, working entity, we must look past the treasure and into the crew's quarters, to the tools that kept them alive and their voyage on course. Here, among the personal lamps that cast a faint glow in the dark hold, we find the true story. A set of stone anchors, heavy and reliable, promised security in a sudden storm. Woodworking adzes and sharp drill bits speak of a carpenter's readiness, the constant need for repairs on a long and punishing journey. A collection of carefully shaped stone weights, likely for a fishing net, reveals a simple, daily ritual. Casting the net was not a pastime, it was a matter of survival, a way to stretch their supplies and maintain the crew's strength far from any port. The sheer diversity and quality of these items points to a single, powerful conclusion. This was not an amateur expedition. It was a highly professional, meticulously equipped operation, a floating workshop commanded by people who knew the sea intimately. The Uluburun does not just suggest that Bronze Age trade was complex. It provides irrefutable physical proof of the sophisticated toolkits that made such staggering journeys not just possible but routine. Far from the sun-drenched Mediterranean, on the misty Atlantic fringe of the British Isles, a different kind of maritime story was being carved. Here, the great oak forests provided the raw material for a vessel as fundamental as it was durable, the logboat. Hewn from a single massive tree trunk, these dugout canoes might seem simple compared to the grand plank-built ships of the South. But their construction was a monumental feat of engineering, demanding a specialized toolkit perfectly adapted to its environment. The process often began with fire setting, where controlled flames were used to char the interior of the log, making the wood softer and easier to remove. Then came the adzes, tools with blades set at a right angle, swung in a relentless rhythm to hollow out the core. Each strike was a calculation, thinning the hull for buoyancy while leaving it strong enough to withstand the cold, choppy waters of the North Atlantic. The evidence of this labor is preserved in the tool marks themselves, grooves left in the ancient wood that tell a story of patience and immense physical effort. But these were not just crude river craft. Archaeological finds reveal that some of the larger logboats were modified with added planks, called wash strakes, to raise their sides and increase their cargo capacity. Others show signs of stabilizers or outriggers, ingenious adaptations for greater stability in open water. Each of these modifications required more than just a basic toolkit. It demanded advanced woodworking skills, the kind that used precise drills and chisels to join additional pieces securely to the main hull. This demonstrates a clear and purposeful evolution. The communities of the British Isles were not just copying ideas from afar, they were actively innovating, solving the unique challenges of their own coastlines with the tools and materials they had. The existence of these sophisticated logboats equipped for coastal journeys and trade proves a powerful point. The drive for maritime connection was not a Mediterranean invention. It was a universal human impulse emerging independently wherever people lived by the sea. Whether with a complex woven sail or a carefully balanced paddle, the goal was the same: to reach beyond the horizon and weave the world closer together. Every tool in a sailor's hand was a piece of a map. The stone of an anchor or the alloy of a bronze adze carried a hidden signature, a geological fingerprint that pointed back to its origin. This is where the story of maritime connection begins, not with the ship's launch, but deep within the earth itself. For a stone anchor to be effective, it needed dense, heavy rock, like basalt or specific types of limestone. These materials were not available on every coastline. Communities often sourced their anchor stones from specific, well-known quarries that could be hundreds of miles away. A ship sailing from the Aegean might carry an anchor borne from a volcanic outcrop in Italy. Similarly, the humble stone weights used for fishing nets were often made from specific, smooth pebbles collected from particular beaches, their unique shape and weight perfect for the task. But the most profound story is told by bronze. This revolutionary alloy is a blend of copper and tin, two metals that are almost never found in the same place. Copper might be mined on the island of Cyprus, while the tin needed to harden it could only be sourced from a handful of distant locations, like Cornwall in the far west of Britain or the Erzgebirge Mountains in Central Europe. The very existence of a bronze tool presupposes an incredible journey long before it was ever cast. How can we be so sure of these ancient supply chains? Modern archaeology uses precise geochemical analysis. Scientists can take a small sample from a stone anchor and match its unique mineral composition to a specific quarry. They can analyze the trace elements in a bronze fish hook and link it to the distinct signature of a copper mine in Sardinia or a tin source in Afghanistan. This technical process reveals connections that history books have forgotten. A tool found in a Scandinavian bog might have a metallic fingerprint pointing to the Mediterranean. An anchor recovered from an Egyptian riverbed could be made of stone from a Greek island. These are the silent, unbreakable links. The raw materials themselves were the first commodities on this vast network, traveling over land and by sea to coastal workshops. There, they were transformed by skilled hands into the very instruments that would then carry other goods back along the same invisible routes. The journey of the metal and stone is the first, essential chapter in the epic story of the tool that crossed the sea. Across the scattered wreckage and harbor sites, a quiet pattern begins to emerge. It is not the pattern of individual genius, but of organized industry. When archaeologists find nearly identical stone anchors with the same shape, the same drilled hole, and even the same type of stone, washing up on shores from Cyprus to Crete, they are looking at more than coincidence. This is the signature of standardization. It tells us that by the height of the Bronze Age, someone, somewhere, was producing maritime tools not for a single village, but for an entire region. This shift from local ad hoc creation to standardized production is a profound turning point. It marks the birth of a specialized trade. Imagine a workshop not on a beach, but perhaps set back in a town dedicated solely to the craft of shaping anchor stones. The artisans there would have honed a single, efficient design, a form proven to hold fast in a storm. They would have secured a reliable supply of the right dense stone, and they would have produced these anchors in quantity, ready for any captain who sailed into port. This is a completely different economic reality. It means that shipbuilding and toolmaking were no longer just skills every coastal community needed to possess. They were recognized, dedicated professions that supported the entire infrastructure of maritime trade. A sailor could now arrive at a foreign port, his own anchor lost in a gale, and acquire a reliable, well-made replacement. This reliability was a form of silent communication, a shared technical language that spanned cultures. It meant that a ship from the Levant and a ship from the Aegean could use and trust the same basic equipment. This move towards standardization did more than just increase efficiency. It built a layer of predictable safety into a deeply unpredictable profession. The existence of this tool-making industry is our clearest evidence that Bronze Age seafaring was not a fringe activity. It was a massive, vital, and organized enterprise, important enough to support its own dedicated economy on the shore. The true power of a bronze adze was never in its metal alone, but in the practiced swing of the arm that held it. These tools were inert objects without the deep, unwritten knowledge of how to use them. Consider the complex sequence of building a ship. It demanded more than just strength. It required an intimate understanding of wood grain, of how to shape a plank so it would flex with the waves instead of splinter. This was not knowledge you could simply read. It was learned over years of apprenticeship, watching a master's every move, listening to his explanations of the sea's demands. The art of reading the stars or judging the wind, the precise angle for a sail to catch a crosswind, the subtle sounds a hull makes when it is stressed, all of this was a form of intangible treasure. This specialized wisdom was a society's most vital maritime asset, passed carefully from one generation to the next, often from father to son, in a continuous chain of practical teaching. When a beautifully crafted tool traveled from one land to another, it rarely journeyed alone. The knowledge to use it effectively often traveled right alongside it. A skilled shipwright captured in conflict might find his life spared for his irreplaceable abilities. Diplomatic gifts between kings could include not just objects, but the artisans who made them. Migrant workers would travel vast distances, bringing their unique methods to new shores. In this light, a simple drill bit becomes more than a tool. It becomes a vessel for ideas. It carries within its design the memory of the hands that first mastered it, and it introduces new possibilities to the hands that receive it. The exchange was not merely one of copper for tin, but of technique for technique, a silent conversation between cultures happening in coastal workshops across the ancient world. The tool was the physical key that unlocked a deeper connection, the transfer of a shared intelligence that truly bound the Bronze Age coastline together. A stone anchor discovered off the coast of Cyprus holds a secret in its shape. The same distinct design, with its characteristic form and carefully drilled hole, appears again in harbors along the Levant and on beaches across the Aegean Sea. This is not a coincidence. When identical solutions to a complex problem emerge in places separated by hundreds of miles of open water, the simplest explanation is that people were talking. They were sharing blueprints not in ink on paper, but through the objects they carried and the craftsmen who traveled with them. The widespread distribution of specific tool types is one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for a truly connected Bronze Age world. Think of a ship's carpenter arriving at a foreign port. He sees a local anchor design that is clearly superior, more reliable in a storm than the one his village uses. He learns its method of construction, or perhaps he trades for one to take home. Upon his return, that new design enters the local workshop. Within a generation, that improved anchor becomes the standard for his entire region. This is how technology diffused, how knowledge flowed along the same sea lanes as copper and tin. The tool itself becomes a cultural marker, a quiet ambassador of innovation. Finding the same specialized fishing net weight in Italy and Greece does not just mean both communities fished. It suggests they fished using the same learned technique, a specific approach that was passed from one group of sailors to another during a chance meeting in a sheltered cove. This pattern of shared technology paints a picture far more vivid than any single trade route. It reveals a maritime community that, despite differences in language and custom, spoke a common technical language. They recognized a good idea when they saw it, and they were eager to adopt whatever made their dangerous profession a little safer, their long journeys a little more efficient. The silent stone proof of these anchors tells us that the Bronze Age sea was not a void between isolated cultures. It was a vibrant meeting place, a liquid continent where practical knowledge was the most valuable cargo of all. A gleaming piece of amber, warm and golden, found in a Mycenaean tomb tells a silent, powerful story. This was no local stone. Its chemical signature points unmistakably to the cold, pine-filled forests of the Baltic, hundreds of miles to the north. How did it get there? The journey of such an object reveals the true scale of Bronze Age connectivity. This was not a simple, single transaction. It was the end point of a vast and complex supply chain, a relay race across continents and seas. Baltic amber would travel overland to the shores of the Mediterranean, where it was loaded onto a ship. That ship, built with tools from one region and crewed by sailors from another, would then carry it across the open sea to a Greek port. From there, it might be traded again, moving inland to a wealthy center like Mycenae. The same intricate story is written in elephant ivory from Africa, appearing in the workshops of the Levant, and in precious lapis lazuli from Afghanistan gracing Egyptian jewelry. These exotic materials are the undeniable fingerprints of long-distance trade, but they share a common physical limitation. Amber, ivory, and ingots of copper and tin are heavy, bulky, and in some cases fragile. Transporting them in meaningful quantities was not a task for a small coastal canoe. It demanded the robust, ocean-going vessels that only a complete maritime toolkit could produce. The ship was the indispensable link. Without the strong hull carved by bronze adzes, without the sail woven from sturdy linen, and without the navigational skills to plot a course across open water, these exotic treasures would have remained isolated curiosities in their lands of origin. Their very presence in distant lands is therefore a direct testament to the effectiveness of the technology that brought them. This movement of raw materials created a new kind of economic reality. A kingdom in Greece did not need its own sources of tin or amber to display its power and wealth. It simply needed access to the sea and the ships that plied it. This created a system of mutual dependence. The prosperity of a palace on the Greek mainland became subtly tied to the productivity of a tin mine in Cornwall and the trading networks of the Adriatic. The Maritime Toolkit was the great enabler of this interdependence. It physically wove these disparate economies together, creating a web of shared interest and mutual benefit that stretched across the known world. So when we admire that piece of polished amber, we are not just looking at a beautiful artifact. We are seeing the final destination of an epic journey, a journey made possible by the strength of a hull, the pull of a sail, and the steady hand on a steering oar. The exotic item is the glittering prize, but the true marvel is the humble, hard-working technology that delivered it. The shared blueprint for a ship's hull may be the most telling clue of all. Across the ancient world, from the warm waters of the Aegean to the rugged Atlantic shores of France, we find ship timbers joined by the same intricate method, the Mortise and Tenon. This was not a simple way to build a boat. It required immense precision, a kind of three-dimensional puzzle where a projecting tongue of wood on one plank was locked perfectly into a carved-out slot on the next. The result was a hull of incredible strength and flexibility, capable of flexing with the ocean's power instead of shattering against it. But this complexity is exactly what makes its widespread use so significant. Such a sophisticated technique does not spread by accident. It cannot be copied from a brief glimpse of a ship in a harbor. Its dispersal points to a deliberate and profound exchange. This is the movement of people, of master shipwrights traveling vast distances, perhaps as honored guests or as captured artisans, sharing their irreplaceable skills in foreign ports. Or it represents the meticulous transfer of knowledge, where an apprentice spent years learning not just how to swing an adze, but the exact geometry of a perfect joint. When cultures separated by language and tradition build the very skeletons of their ships in an identical manner, it signals something deeper than trade. It reveals a shared technological language, a common understanding of how to solve the fundamental challenge of surviving the sea. This was not just an exchange of goods, but an exchange of genius. The hull of a ship became a universal manuscript, written in wood, telling the same story of connection from one end of the known world to the other. Sometimes the most durable records are not made of bronze or stone, but of paint and clay. In the vibrant frescoes of Akrotiri, buried for millennia under the volcanic ash of Thera, a flotilla of ships glides across a brilliant blue sea. Their sails are billowing, their rigging a complex web of lines, and their crews are shown in active poses, almost as if caught in a moment of shouted command and coordinated effort. This is more than a beautiful scene, it is a technical document. These artists were depicting what they saw every day, and in their careful brushstrokes, they preserved details of maritime life that wood and rope could never withstand the centuries to show us. We see the exact placement of the steering oar, the intricate way the sail was reefed, and the number of oarsmen needed to power a vessel of a certain size. This iconographic evidence provides a parallel narrative to the one told by the shipwrecks. In Egypt, stone carvings on temple walls show pharaohs receiving exotic goods from ships of Keftiu, a land believed to be Crete. These reliefs do not just celebrate trade, they document the very shape of the ships that made it possible, confirming the existence of deep water vessels capable of such long-distance diplomatic missions. And from Cyprus we find small, carefully crafted clay models of boats. These were not toys. They were often found in religious or burial contexts, suggesting that the ship itself held a powerful symbolic meaning, representing journey, trade, and perhaps even the passage to an afterlife. These models show us the elegant curves of a hull and the placement of central masts with a clarity that fragmented timbers from a wreck site often cannot. Every painted sailor hauling on a rope, every carved image of a cargo being unloaded, and every clay model placed in a tomb adds a crucial layer to our understanding. They confirm that seafaring was not just an economic activity, it was woven into the very fabric of Bronze Age culture, religion, and identity. The physical tools tell us how these voyages were possible, but the art tells us why they mattered. These tools were not frozen in time. They changed with the tides of the age, each generation of shipwrights and sailors refining their craft. Picture the earliest stone anchor, a simple, heavy rock with a rope tied through a hole. It was functional but limited. Over centuries, this basic design transformed into something far more elegant and effective, the composite anchor. This was a technological leap. It combined a heavy stone or lead core with a wooden crosspiece called a stock. This stock ensured the anchor would always dig one of its flukes into the seabed, creating a grip the old stone block could never achieve. This was not a minor improvement, it was a revolution in maritime safety, allowing ships to confidently weather stronger storms in deeper water. The same relentless refinement applied to sails. Early square sails gave way to larger, more versatile designs. The simple web of rigging evolved into a complex system of lines and pulleys, giving sailors finer control over their single, powerful engine. They learned to angle the sail to capture winds from the side, a technique called sailing closer to the wind, which dramatically expanded their possible routes. The shape of the hull itself was constantly reimagined. Shipbuilders learned to carve a deeper, more pronounced keel, which acted like a fin to prevent the ship from slipping sideways in the water. The bows became sharper, slicing through waves instead of pounding against them. This was all driven by a powerful, relentless pressure. Trade routes were stretching longer, demanding vessels that could travel farther on the same supplies. Cargoes were growing heavier as the appetites of distant palaces for exotic goods increased, and there was competition. A trading power whose ships were slower or less seaworthy, or whose anchors failed more often, would simply be left behind. The archaeological record is a timeline of this quiet race. We can trace the slow, steady thickening of a hull plank over 300 years, a direct response to carrying more copper ingots. We can see the gradual shift in the shape of a steering oar, becoming more balanced for easier handling on those endless voyages. This evolution was not about vanity, it was about survival and supremacy on the open water. The constant improvement of the Maritime Toolkit is our clearest barometer for the growing ambition of the entire age. It measures the rising intensity of trade, the expanding map of the known world, and the human drive to push the horizon just a little further, one better tool at a time. A stone anchor could carry a belief system across the sea. The same maritime networks that delivered copper and tin became a superhighway for something far less tangible, yet equally transformative, the flow of culture itself. Consider the journey of the Egyptian goddess Hathor. Her distinctive symbol, a face with cow's ears, began appearing on delicate ivory carvings and ornate seal stones not just in Egypt, but in the palaces of the Levant and on the island of Cyprus. This was not an invasion of faith, but a quiet absorption. A Canaanite artisan, perhaps inspired by a story told by a sailor or a small amulet brought ashore, might incorporate Hathor's likeness into a locally made object, creating a beautiful hybrid of Egyptian and local styles. This was cultural fusion in action, and it was made possible because the ships were running on time. The exchange went far beyond religion. Architectural ideas traveled the same sea lanes. The design of a certain type of fortified gateway, once thought to be a unique feature of Mycenaean Greek citadels, appears in the Hittite lands of Anatolia. The distinctive shape of a drinking cup popular in Greece shows up in southern Italy. Even culinary habits shifted, with evidence of new spices and food preparation techniques spreading from one coastal region to another. The ship itself was the ultimate cultural blender. In its crowded hold, a sailor from one land would share a meal with a merchant from another, exchanging stories, songs, and worldviews during the long, star-filled nights at sea. When that ship finally made landfall, it did not just offload jars of oil and blocks of metal. It released these new ideas into the port city, where they could take root and evolve. The Maritime Toolkit, therefore, was not merely a set of physical instruments. It was the key that unlocked a continuous, vibrant conversation between civilizations. The true legacy of these Bronze Age sailors is not measured in the weight of the cargo they moved, but in the invisible, enduring connections they forged between the imaginations of the ancient world. The idea of the timid Bronze Age mariner nervously skirting the shoreline is a story we have told ourselves for too long. this comforting myth simply does not hold up against the physical evidence left behind. These sailors were not primitive coast huggers. They were masters of the open ocean, and their toolkits prove it. Consider the very design of their ships. A vessel built for coastal hopping would be shallow and wide, unable to handle the powerful swells of the deep sea. But the hulls we find, with their deep keels and strong, Mortise and Tenon joined planks, were engineered specifically for stability and strength in open water. They were built to flex with the ocean's might, not to hide from it. Then there is the fishing gear. Why would a crew that never lost sight of land need deep water net weights and strong, barbed harpoons? These tools were for harvesting food from the abyss, far from any coastal fishing grounds. They speak of weeks spent on the open water, of a self-sufficiency that only comes from confidence far from any shore. Most conclusively, we have the cargo itself. The sheer weight of the copper ingots on the Uluburun ship, all 10 tons of them, is a fact that sinks the coastal theory. No captain would risk such a valuable load on a slow, treacherous journey from one visible headland to the next, a journey that would take years. That ship was built for the direct blue water route, cutting across the open Mediterranean to deliver its heavy freight efficiently. This was not a journey of fear, but one of calculated skill. They possessed a sophisticated understanding of seasonal winds, celestial navigation, and the behavior of their own robust technology. Recognizing their true capabilities completely reshapes our view of the age. This was not a time of isolated villages. It was an era of bold exploration and brilliant engineering, where the sea was not a wall but a welcome highway, traversed by people who knew exactly what they were doing. This deep environmental wisdom was a living library, carried not on scrolls but in the memories of seasoned sailors. The most reliable engine for a Bronze Age ship was not its sail, but a predictable wind. Mariners came to know the great seasonal winds as if they were old friends. They planned entire voyages around the powerful Artesian winds of the Mediterranean, which blew steadily from the north each summer, or the mighty monsoons of the Indian Ocean, whose cyclical reversal could carry a vessel out and then bring it safely home. These were not just weather patterns, they were the invisible highways of the ancient world, natural forces so dependable they could be woven into the very calendar of trade. A captain setting out from Egypt knew that if he left with the summer Artesians at his back, he could reach the coast of Lebanon in a matter of days. This knowledge transformed the sea from a chaotic wilderness into a structured, navigable space. But the wind was only one chapter in this unwritten guide. The ocean itself whispered clues to those who knew how to listen. A change in the water's color could signal a shift in depth or a nearby river outflow. The specific feel of a current against the hull told a story of its origin and strength. A flock of seabirds flying in a determined direction at dusk almost always pointed toward land, their behavior a reliable compass for finding distant shores. Even the presence of certain marine mammals or floating vegetation could confirm a ship was on a known, productive route. This collective intelligence, accumulated over generations and passed orally from master to apprentice, was the ultimate navigational system. It was the cognitive software that made the physical hardware of the ship and its toolkit truly functional. A perfect bronze adze was useless in the hands of a captain who did not know when to sail. A strong hull meant nothing if its crew could not find their way. This intimate dialogue with the natural world allowed these ancient mariners to do more than just react to their environment. It allowed them to predict, to plan, and to venture across the open ocean with a confidence that still astounds us today. The hunger of empires forged these tools. Far from the coast, in the sun-baked river valleys of Egypt and Mesopotamia, royal workshops and temple treasuries demanded a constant flow of materials these lands simply did not possess. They needed the strong cedar timber from the mountains of Lebanon to build their palaces and sacred barks. They required tons of copper from Cyprus and tin from mysterious, distant lands to forge the weapons of their armies and the ornaments of their elites. They craved the gleaming ivory of African elephants and the deep blue lapis lazuli from the mountains of Afghanistan. This was not a casual wish list. It was an economic imperative, a relentless pressure that traveled down trade routes and settled squarely on the shoulders of shipbuilders and sailors. The value of these goods was so immense that it created a powerful incentive, a financial gravity strong enough to pull innovation from the minds of artisans. Why build a slightly larger ship? Because it could carry a dozen more copper ingots on a single voyage, dramatically increasing a merchant's profit. Why invest weeks in perfecting a stronger joint for the hull? Because a ship that did not splinter in a storm protected a king's ransom in cargo. Why train a crew in the difficult art of sailing against the wind? Because it cut the journey time in half, allowing for 2 lucrative trips in a single season instead of one. The Maritime Toolkit did not evolve in a vacuum. Each heavier anchor, each more efficient sail, each sharper bronze chisel was a direct answer to a question asked by the market. The drive for greater capacity, speed, and safety was fueled by the dazzling value of the resources being moved. This was a cycle of progress driven by pure economics. The demand for resources funded the innovation in ship technology, and that improved technology, in turn, unlocked access to even more distant resources, creating new demands and starting the cycle all over again. The true blueprint for the Bronze Age ship was not drawn on papyrus. It was written in the account books of merchants and the treasure lists of pharaohs. These tools carved out a new kind of life on the shoreline, one that stood apart from the farmer in his field or the potter at his wheel. The specialized knowledge of the sailor and the shipwright was not something that could be learned in a season. It was a lifetime's craft, and it created a distinct social class with its own rules and rewards. Imagine a harbor master, a man who could speak the languages of 3 different ports, understanding the tides and the tariffs. Or a shipwright whose reputation for building strong hulls was known from one end of the sea to the other. These were not just jobs, they were identities forged by the ocean. Their value came from a very practical place. A king might rule the land, but his power and wealth increasingly depended on the people who could command the sea lanes. The sailor who could navigate by the stars and the merchant who knew where to find the best price for tin were indispensable. Their skills gave them a form of social mobility that was rare in the ancient world. A talented ship captain could gain wealth and influence that rivaled a local chieftain's, all based on his personal expertise and the trust placed in his abilities. This was a quiet social revolution powered not by birthright but by knowledge. This maritime world developed its own culture, a kind of international fraternity. In every port from the Nile Delta to the Aegean Islands, these men would have shared a common understanding. They used a specialized jargon for rigging and winds that a farmer would not comprehend. They likely had their own stories and songs about legendary voyages and treacherous storms, tales that would be told and retold in the flickering light of a harbor-side fire. Their social networks were not bound by village walls. A sailor's closest professional contacts might live in a city a week's sail away. This created a web of human connection that ran parallel to the trade in goods. A harbor master in Ugarit might vouch for a merchant from Crete, smoothing his entry into a new market based on a reputation earned across the water. This professional trust was the glue that held the entire system together. The regular movement of these individuals, carrying news and ideas along with their cargo, meant that the coastal settlements were often the most cosmopolitan places in the Bronze Age world. They were the first to hear about a new dynasty in Egypt or a conflict in Anatolia. This constant flow of information and people made the harbor town a crucible of innovation and cultural exchange, all because a class of professionals had emerged to manage the practicalities of the sea. The very existence of this specialized maritime class is one of the strongest arguments for the scale of Bronze Age connectivity. You do not get full-time professional sailors in a society that only occasionally sends a boat to a neighboring village. Such a class only emerges when seafaring is a regular, organized, and economically vital activity. The tools they used were the symbols of their profession. A bronze adze was not just a woodworking instrument, it was a badge of the Shipwrights Guild. A set of polished stone net weights signified a sailor who knew how to feed his crew on a long journey. These objects helped build something more profound than a ship. They helped build a new, interconnected social identity. A man might have been born in Cyprus, but if he spent his life sailing the coasts of Greece and the Levant, his primary loyalty may have shifted. His identity became tied to the sea itself and to the scattered community of those who worked upon it. This transcended the local loyalties that had defined human society for millennia. The Maritime Toolkit, therefore, was not merely a collection of functional items. It was the foundation upon which a new way of being was constructed, a life that looked outward to the horizon, binding the ancient world together not just with ropes and planks, but with shared experience and a common purpose. Yet for all its sophistication, this entire network balanced on a knife's edge. A sudden shift in the climate could alter the very wind patterns that sailors had relied on for generations, leaving ships stranded for weeks. Political turmoil in a single powerful kingdom could snap a vital trade route, starving distant workshops of the copper and tin they needed to function. And then there were the ever-present human dangers. The same sea lanes that carried wealth also attracted piracy, where a fast ship and a well-armed crew could plunder a merchant vessel's precious cargo with little hope of rescue. The advanced toolkits provided no defense against a surprise attack or a rogue wave in a winter gale. A bronze adze could repair a plank, but it could not calm a storm. A stone anchor could hold fast in a cove, but it could not stop a band of raiders. This inherent fragility became tragically clear around 1200 years before the Common Era, when a cascade of upheavals, from migration to internal conflict, led to the stunning collapse of the great Bronze Age palaces and kingdoms. Almost overnight, the intricate web of connections that had stretched from Greece to Egypt began to fray and then sever. The specialized knowledge of open water navigation and ship construction was not entirely lost, but it retreated into smaller, local traditions. The distribution of identical stone anchors and bronze tools across vast distances suddenly stopped. This was not a gradual decline, but a swift unraveling of a globalized system. That collapse stands as a powerful reminder. Our own interconnected world, for all its digital resilience, is not so different. It, too, is a complex system vulnerable to shocks and disruptions. The story of the Bronze Age sea networks compels us to appreciate not just the brilliance required to build such connections, but the profound resilience needed to sustain them across the centuries. The collapse of the palace economies did not erase their maritime legacy from the sea. Instead, that hard-won knowledge was absorbed and refined by a new generation of seafarers. The Phoenicians, emerging from the coastal cities of the Levant, became the direct inheritors of this tradition. They took the Bronze Age blueprint for a strong, Mortise and Tenon hull and stretched it, creating the sleek, capacious trading vessels that would become the envy of the ancient world. These ships were not a sudden invention, but an evolution, a direct line of technological descent from the workshops of a forgotten age. The Greeks and later the Romans followed, each adding their own innovations to the foundational toolkit. The simple steering oar, once a massive plank on the ship's side, was gradually relocated to the stern and transformed into the far more efficient axial rudder, giving a single pilot unprecedented control. Sail plans grew more complex, with multiple sails allowing these new classical galleys to harness the wind with a sophistication their Bronze Age predecessors could only hint at. The core principles, however, remained unshaken. The need for a flexible yet strong hull, the understanding of how to rig a sail to capture a crosswind, the accumulated wisdom of celestial navigation, these were not rediscovered but preserved. The bustling Roman grain ships that supplied the city of Rome, the mighty triremes that patrolled the Hellenic seas, even the legendary voyages described in epic poetry, all rested upon a foundation laid 1,000 years earlier. The Bronze Age mariner did not just build ships, they built a technological paradigm, a way of thinking about and conquering the sea that would guide shipwrights for millennia. Their weathered tools were the prototypes, and the classical world was the magnificent, sprawling production. The true legacy of the Bronze Age is not found in its palaces, but in its tools. A simple stone anchor, a carefully cast bronze adze, a length of woven rope, these were the quiet instruments that built a world. They were far more than basic implements. They were the fundamental keys that unlocked an entire era of coastal connectivity. These toolkits enabled a constant flow of goods, from common copper to exotic amber, but they carried something even more precious, the flow of ideas and people across vast and formidable distances. They wove a complex web of interaction, a vibrant network of shared knowledge and mutual dependence that stretched from the Baltic to the Nile. This ancient system prefigured our own globalized world in ways we are only beginning to understand. By carefully studying these humble objects, we gain a profound appreciation for the sheer ingenuity and immense courage of our ancient ancestors. They looked upon a trackless ocean and saw not a barrier but a pathway, and they crafted the very technology to walk upon it. Their story challenges us to see the deep, unexpected roots of global exchange. It urges us to consider the tools we use today to build our own connections, the digital networks and satellites that now weave our world together. The fundamental human drive remains the same: to reach out, to trade, to share, and to understand. The Bronze Age sailor with a calloused hand on a steering oar was a pioneer of that very impulse. If this journey into our shared past has enlightened you, please subscribe for more explorations into history's greatest mysteries. We would love to hear your thoughts on Bronze Age seafaring in the comments below.